call your next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state calls Dr. Romero.
Before you take a seat, let me swear you in. You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth and the penalty of law.
I do.
And take a seat.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Good afternoon. My name is Lori Pro. I'm a forensic pathologist with the Office of the Medical Investigator in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
And now if you could please, doctor, for the record, if you could spell your first and last name.
My first name is spelled Lori, last name is spelled Proe.
Thank you. Dr. Pro, you said you're employed with the Office of the Medical Examiner.
Yes.
What do you do there?
As a forensic pathologist employed in that office, my job is to investigate sudden, unexpected, suspicious, or unnatural deaths, or deaths in which the cause of death is not clear.
And are your duties regulated by any kind of statute or administrative rule code?
Yes, our office exists, at least in part, to perform statutory duties, again, to investigate sudden and unexpected deaths that occur in New Mexico.
And Dr. Pro, could you please give the jury an idea of your training and background?
So I have a bachelor's of arts degree in art that I earned in 1994. After working for about 8 years, I went to medical school starting in 2003. I got my Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine degree in 2007 and then started an anatomic and clinical pathology residency at that time. Anatomic and clinical pathology teaches doctors to make diagnoses of disease based on examining the human body, organs, tissues, and fluids from the body. After I finished my anatomic and clinical pathology residency in 2011, I came out here to New Mexico to complete a 1-year fellowship in forensic pathology. Forensic pathology is the subspecialty of pathology in which physicians, pathologists, are trained to determine cause of death by examining the body.
Okay, and could you explain, you said you did a residency. What's a residency? What's the purpose of, the purpose of that?
The purpose of a residency is essentially to do on-the-job training. After people finish medical school, they've got a degree in medicine, but they don't have a lot of hands-on experience. And that residency period gives you some time to understand how to do your job in the real world.
Is that required to become is that a requirement to become a forensic pathologist?
Yes, it is. We're required to do that preliminary training in general pathology to prepare us to go on to the next step and do additional training in the subspecialty of forensic pathology.
Do you have any certifications, doctor?
Yes, I am board certified in anatomic and clinical pathology and also in forensic pathology by the American Board of Pathology.
And do you hold a current license in New Mexico?
Yes, I do.
And Dr. Pro, have you ever been qualified as an expert witness?
Yes, I have.
And approximately how many times have you been qualified?
It's in the range of 25 to 30 times in both state and United States federal court.
And do you know in what areas you've been qualified?
I've been qualified as an expert witness in forensic pathology.
Your Honor, at this time I would offer Dr. Pro as an expert in forensic pathology.
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you, Your Honor. Dr. Pro, is UNM a teaching hospital?
Yes, it is.
So does that include the Office of the Medical Examiners? Do you also have a teaching function?
We do, yes.
And could you explain that?
So we have a couple of roles. We are considered a part of the Department of Pathology at the University of New Mexico Health Sciences Center. This is in addition to our state mandate. So we have dual roles. One is to investigate deaths under statutory duty, but we also have a duty in our office to teach. We teach medical students who come through our office. We give lectures at the University of New Mexico School of Medicine. One of our more important duties is to train young pathology residents in the performance of autopsy. So pathology residents at the University of New Mexico will come through our office to learn autopsy. And then finally, we also train forensic pathology fellows. So we have a forensic pathology fellowship training program, and it's our job and our duty to train young pathologists in how to be forensic pathologists.
So as part of your duties, do you also supervise individuals in the fellowship program?
Yes, I do.
Dr. Pro, I want to ask you about a case involving the deceased by the name of Nigel Greg Benner. Are you familiar with that case?
Yes, I am.
And Dr. Pro, could you, first of all, did you yourself perform the autopsy?
No, I did not perform this autopsy myself. I supervised the work of one of our forensic pathology fellows by the name of Dr. Nika Aljenovich.
And could you explain to the jury how it is that you're able to, how do you exactly supervise to ensure that everything the fellow is doing is correct and the conclusions are accurate?
Generally speaking, the degree to which a fellow needs supervision depends upon his or her level of training. So when fellows first come to our office in July, they may not have had much experience examining people who've suffered violent trauma. As time passes, we feel it's very important for fellows to become more independent. So it depends a bit upon the level of training and the stage of the game. So in the beginning, it would be important, I think, for me to be present during much of the time of the examination, or at least during times when critical injuries are being examined. As time passes and the fellow becomes more proficient and more experienced, less supervision is necessary.
And regardless of how much experience a fellow has, do you still maintain supervisory responsibility over the fellow?
Yes, I do. Until that fellow is completely finished with fellowship, their work is also my responsibility.
And in the case of, I think you said Nika Aljenovich?
Yes.
Did I say that right?
Yes.
I'm surprised that I did. How experienced was she when she did this autopsy?
As I mentioned, our fellowship program begins in July under most circumstances, so this examination occurred in May. So Nika was almost finished, Dr. Aljenovich was almost finished with her fellowship when she performed this examination.
So as part of the process, Dr. Pro, are photographs taken to document the findings?
Yes, they are.
And then is there also a report of findings that's generated?
There is, yes.
Now, did you review both the photographs as well as all of the documentation, diagrams and any notes that were made concerning this autopsy?
Yes.
Your Honor, could I ask the doctor to step down? If you could step down here, Dr. Pro, and I'm going to ask you to go through a series of photographs, but first what I want to ask you is this the individual you recall that the autopsy was done on?
Yes, this is what we call an identification photograph, and we take an identification photograph of all persons that we examine. And even if I don't specifically remember a person's appearance, we do have a case number that's assigned to everyone. And although you cannot see it in this photograph, it is in the fully expanded version of that photograph. So I know for sure what person I'm talking about.
Okay. And Dr. Pro, you said that there's also, well, I don't know if you did or not, I'm sorry. Do you also prepare a body diagram to notate injuries?
It's my standard practice to include a body diagram as part of my report, yes.
Now, before we go through the injuries or what your findings, what I'd like you to do is explain to the jury, kind of take them to the process, the steps that you take when a deceased is brought in for examination.
So So as I said, our primary job is to investigate sudden, unexpected, unnatural, or suspicious deaths. And the level of examination depends a bit upon the nature of the case. In some cases, it's very obvious what the cause of death is without performing a complete autopsy. In other cases, we do need to perform an external and an internal exam as well in order to either determine the cause of death or collect evidence and verify what happened. So in an individual who's going to receive an autopsy, in most cases, I should back up a moment and say that we do have a computed tomography, a CT scanner in our office, and most people who come to our office for examination do get a CT scan, and that's one of the first things that happens when they arrive.
What's the purpose of that, Dr. Pro?
The CT scan can be used to help us identify injuries. It can be used to help us identify signs of natural disease. In cases of gunshot wound injuries, it's also a very useful tool to help us identify whether there are any retained bullets, and if so, where they are, so that we have some guidance as we go looking for those pieces of evidence.
And did you do that in this case?
Yes, we did.
And what did you discover from the CT scan? Or what was discovered from the CT scan?
So my recollection of the results from the CT scan are that there was blood in the chest cavities, some collections of air in the chest cavities. There were retained missiles, and my recollection is that one appeared to be in the general right shoulder area, and one was in the right abdominal area.
Okay. And so after the CT scan, what was the next step?
After the CT scan is done, it's then our job to do an examination of the body. We start by looking at the outside and taking photographs to document how the deceased person appeared. We want to document any injuries that we can see from the outside of the body. We want to document any signs of natural disease from the outside. It's at that point that some pieces of evidence might be collected, things like fingernails or clothing or bits of scalp hair. It again depends somewhat on the nature of the case.
Can I get her to come to this side in front of the microphone or somehow?
Okay, sorry.
No, that's my fault. Go ahead.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Pro, you mentioned fingernail clippings. Did you do that in this case?
Yes, we did collect fingernail clippings in this case.
And what's the purpose of doing that?
It's something that we do when we're concerned about homicide, and particularly when we think there might possibly have been some sort of interpersonal contact between the deceased person and the person who killed him. So fingernail clippings have the potential of having DNA evidence under them if there was a physical altercation. We don't always know if there was one, but we like to take more evidence than needed rather than less evidence.
And in this case, do you have any specific knowledge that there was a physical confrontation?
At the time that we did our examination, it was not completely clear to me whether there had been a physical fight or if there had just been shots fired from a distance.
So is that why you did it out of caution?
Yes.
Do you do any sort of what's commonly called gunshot residue testing?
We do not do gunshot residue testing. If law enforcement agencies request such testing, we're happy to collect that evidence if they provide us the kit that's required to do so.
Did you do that in this case?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay. So Dr. Pro, now what I'd like to do is have you, first of all, I'm going to show you a diagram. This is State's Exhibit 405. Do you recognize that diagram, Dr. Pro?
Yes, I do.
Okay. You know what, I bet if you go, try going on the other side if you don't mind. I'm going to turn this, let's see if that works. Is that better? Okay. So, if you could, just describe what this diagram depicts and what the purpose of the diagram is, first of all.
This diagram depicts the human body from the front and the back, and I use it, most of us use them to allow us to, in a very concise way, show any injuries that are on the body. And I think it's helpful because one can see the entire body front and back and get a good overview of the nature of any injuries that are present.
Okay. And could you tell the jury, using the diagram and supplemented by the photographs as necessary, what injuries were found on Officer Benner?
There were gunshot wound injuries and some blunt injuries, and I think we can start with what's labeled here on this diagram. I don't know how well you can see it, but it's labeled as A. This is an So this is an entrance gunshot wound. It's labeled as A, and as you can tell, it's on the back, the upper right back. There's some documentation. Notes are taken about the size of the entrance wound and its general location on the body.
And is that a photograph of that same? Now we need to zoom back out. Oops. What did I do? There we go. And is that the same injury you were talking about?
Yes, this is, again, a photograph of gunshot wound A entrance, which is on the upper right back.
Okay. And then what is that, Dr. Pro?
This is a close-up view of entrance gunshot wound A. The first picture helps us orient where the injury is located on the body, and this close-up view helps us identify characteristics of the wound, its general shape, any injuries around it, that sort of thing.
And for that particular gunshot wound, were you able to determine, was there an exit?
No, there was not an exit associated with this entrance wound.
So for that particular injury, did you recover a missile or any type of fragments?
Yes, a missile was recovered. I believe it was in the upper right shoulder area.
And then if you could just continue, Doctor, describing the next injury that you found, or the next, well, first of all, how many gunshot wounds did you discover?
There were a total of 4 gunshot wounds. There were 3 entrance wounds and 1 exit wound.
Okay. And then, what area are we going to talk about now, Doctor?
I might want to specify just briefly that this is, again, that entrance wound A that we just discussed. The missile that was recovered associated with that entrance was from this general area, which we've labeled as E. The second gunshot wound to discuss is labeled as C, so it's on the upper left shoulder or arm. Again, this is entrance gunshot wound C on the upper left shoulder. And this is a photograph. This is Mr. Officer Benner's back, and you can see there is an entrance wound over here on the left upper arm or shoulder.
There we go.
And again, this is a close-up view of that entrance gunshot wound C, just giving us an idea of how the wound looked up close and any specific characteristics that it might have.
And, okay, let's switch back to the diagram now. What other wounds did you discover?
So gunshot wound C, that entrance wound that we just looked at, went through the chest and through the left lung and through the heart and through the diaphragm and through the liver, and it was recovered in this general area of the abdomen, which is labeled on this diagram as F. It did not exit, but there was a bruise on that part of the abdomen that was associated with the location of that missile. Additionally, there are a couple, sorry, do you want to, there's a photograph of that area where there's a contusion or a bruise. So this is where the missile, the bullet, from gunshot wound A was recovered up here in the upper right arm, shoulder area. And this is the bruise that overlies the area where the missile from gunshot wound C was recovered. So this, as you can see, is in the right abdomen. Of note, one of the many things that we document during an examination is medical intervention, and this is just a photograph showing where a chest tube was placed in that right chest. So that's not an injury, that's medical therapy.
Now, was there anything more about that you wanted to talk about, Dr. Pro?
I don't think so,
Okay.
unless there are questions.
Just a closer up?
Yeah, that's just a closer up view of where the missile was, one of the missiles was recovered.
Okay. And what are we looking at here, Dr. Pro?
So this is, she labeled it as F. It is the bruised area of the right abdomen where a bullet was recovered that was associated with that gunshot wound that entered on the left upper arm or shoulder.
Okay. So if we're looking at the diagram, Dr. Pro, well, let's stay there for a second. I know it's a little bit hard, but get it a little bit higher. Okay, so we're talking about, because the labels might be a little bit confusing. So again, when you're talking about start with wound A or gunshot A, that's the entrance?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and was there an exit wound for that?
No, there was no exit associated with gunshot wound A.
Okay, but you said there was a bruise associated where the missile came to rest?
That's right, yes.
And what is that labeled?
That's labeled as E right here.
Okay. And then as far as letter C, that's also an entry wound?
Yes, letter C is an entry wound, entrance wound.
And was there an exit wound for that?
No, there was not.
So is there a letter associated with a bruise where that missile came to rest?
Yes, the missile associated with entrance wound C came to rest in the right abdomen, which is designated here as F, which had a bruise over it.
Okay. Besides those that we've talked about, was there another gunshot wound that you discovered?
Yes, there was one more gunshot wound, and this is on the right lower leg here. The entrance, it's a little bit difficult even for me to read, but this is entrance gunshot wound B, and it exits right here at D. So it literally just goes through some skin and subcutaneous tissue and then comes right out. There's an entrance and exit, and no significant internal injuries associated with that.
Okay, now so there was an entry and an exit for that one?
That's right, yes.
So is that what's commonly called a through and through?
Yes, we sometimes call those types of ones through and throughs.
So what are we looking at? We're not looking at anything there. Let's see. What are we looking at there, Doctor?
This is entrance gunshot wound B, which is the entrance wound for that injury of the right lower leg.
Okay. And is that the same wound?
Yes, this is the entrance gunshot wound B that we just discussed, and more clearly in focus in this picture is a contusion or a bruise of the calf, the right calf.
Okay. And then, it's a little hard to see, but is that the same wound that we're talking about right there, Doctor? No, you want to make it bigger? Let's see.
The focus is not great on this, I apologize, but this is the exit that's associated with entrance wound B, and this was labeled as D.
So on the diagram, it would be, it's almost too big. So again,
So that small injury that we just saw in the photograph is labeled as D here. And it looks more like it's on the front of the leg in that picture, and these diagrams are not 100% accurate, but display a general.
and again, what are we looking at here?
what we're seeing in this photograph is the right leg. Down here you can see the label for gunshot wound B, and up here we've just taken a close-up photo of some abrasions or skin scrapes and a small contusion or bruise of that right thigh.
Okay. Did you need anything else you needed to explain on the diagram? Do you want to take another look at it?
In addition to documenting those gunshot wounds, there are some other minor blunt injuries that were documented as well. There's a bruise here on the right elbow, and that abrasion and contusion, bruise and scrape that we just saw in the photographs.
Now, were you able to determine when those bruises or contusions occurred?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. Anything else from the diagram?
That's all from the diagram. I would like to just make a comment that we do label our injuries with letters, but those letters don't actually indicate what order the injuries occurred in or how severe they were. They're just there to help us document and keep track.
Right. That's what we're going to talk about next. So you can go back up to the witness stand, if you don't mind. Thank you, ma'am. Okay. So, Dr. Pro, you led to my next area. You're alluding to my next area of inquiry, which is, first of all, I'll just ask you again, are you able to determine what order those shots were entered Officer Bender's body?
No, I wasn't.
Is there any way to do that scientifically?
Not in this case, no.
Why not?
All of the injuries, none of the injuries would have been immediately fatal, and there are no characteristics of the wounds that would indicate whether they occurred, how quick in proximity to the death they occurred. So there's just not a way to look at the injuries and where they are and know which one came first.
Okay. And what, in your opinion, what was the most severe injury?
The most severe injury was that gunshot wound C. That's the one that went into the upper left shoulder or arm and went through the chest and damaged the left lung and the heart and the liver and the diaphragm.
And this is again the that's the wound that you're talking about there?
Yes, it is.
And why? I mean, how many vital organs did that round hit?
3, the liver, the heart, and the left lung.
And the heart, did it hit any of those organs more than once?
No.
Okay. So I think you had testified that there was also, the other 2 injuries were less severe?
Yes.
Okay. So describe, first of all, for the second, or not necessarily second in order, but the next one that you indicated, which I believe was letter A.
Okay.
Now, what was that injury, and tell us in layman's terms what that projectile did as it entered Officer Benner's body?
So that wound had injury of the skin and the underlying soft tissue, the muscle of the back, and the scapula or shoulder blade. So it went right through the shoulder blade, and then the missile lodged in some of the soft tissue just in front of the shoulder blade, or in the right upper arm.
And what about the injury that you described as having entered and exited in the back of the knee there?
Yes.
That was number D, I believe? Or B, I'm sorry.
Yes, entrance B is in boy, associated with exit D is in dog. That wound just damaged skin and some of the superficial underlying soft tissues before exiting.
Was there any broken bone associated with that?
No.
What about with the second one we just talked about?
Gunshot wound A, the one that went through the shoulder blade, did break that shoulder blade.
Now, we've already talked about, Dr. Pro, how you can't tell your science and your base of what you do is not able to determine which shot was fired first. Do you have an opinion about which was the fatal wound?
Yes, it would have been entrance wound, gunshot wound C, the one that went through the chest.
And can you tell, is part of what you do, Dr. Pro, determining trajectory, in other words, the trajectory, the path of the bullet as it entered the body?
Yes, that's part of what we do.
Let's start backwards since we've already got the leg wound up. Based on your examination of the wound, the exit and the entrance wound, do you have an opinion as to the trajectory of that particular missile or bullet?
Yes, that wound traveled upward and from right to left. So it enters on the right side of the right calf, goes upward, and exits the left side of the right calf.
And again, let's see about D. I must have these letters memorized. So that's the entrance to that, and this is the exit?
Yes, that's right.
And it's kind of hard to tell, but get the diagram for a second. So, are you talking about, it actually entered, it entered in the front or the side, or how did it exactly enter? I'm not sure.
Sure, it goes through, so it enters on the right calf.
Would you want to come down?
I'm not sure.
I mean, would that help you to be able to show, or maybe you could just stand around and just show them on your leg or my leg? So I'm going to use my leg.
So if you turn around, the entrance is on this right calf down here, and it goes up and out, sort of the side.
Okay,
of
maybe
the
if I
knee.
go ahead and do it again.
So the entrance is about approximately in this location here of the right calf, and the wound goes up and towards the middle, and then out near the knee.
And
on
so
that side.
it comes out somewhere in this area?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Did all the jurors see? Thank you, Dr. Pro. That was helpful. Okay, so now let's talk about the non-fatal shoulder wound, which was, that was D, I believe? Or was that A?
The
I mean, A
non-fatal,
or C?
it was A.
A.
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about A next, which is this one, correct?
Yes.
Were you able to determine a trajectory for the path of that bullet as it entered Officer Benner's body?
Yes, and I should probably specify that when we're talking about trajectory or the directionality of a wound, we're talking about how it travels with relationship to the body. We describe things in what we call the anatomic position. And so when we're describing things in anatomic position, we're imagining that person standing in front of us with his palms out toward us, feet straight ahead. So with that in mind, the directionality of the gunshot wound A goes from the back to the front. It goes slightly from right to left, and I believe it also traveled downward just a little bit.
Okay. And then finally, let's talk about the wound labeled C that you've testified in your opinion was the fatal wound, which entered here, correct?
Yes, that's right.
Is that the wound we're talking about?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And were you able to determine a trajectory for the missile that entered Officer Benner at that location?
Yes, so the trajectory of that missile is from left to right, slightly from back to front, and downward.
Okay. Dr. Dr. Pro, I think you testified earlier, I believe you did, if not, I'll just ask you again. Do you bag the hands of the decedents who come into your laboratory?
I don't personally do it, but our investigators who go to the scenes of deaths will often and generally bag the hands in cases of a gunshot wound.
Okay. And then after it comes to your lab, well, the autopsy room, I'm not sure what you call it, but what, if anything, is done with the hands that are bagged by you or the pathologist?
The idea behind bagging the hands is to protect any evidence that might be there, you know, any DNA that might have been transferred from an assailant to a victim, any possible trace evidence, something like that. So when body arrives in our office, the bags are left in place until the pathologist has a chance to look at the hands and be there and present when the bags are removed. So this should preserve the hands as best possible as they would have appeared during or right after the death occurred. So we will photograph the hands as they are when the bags are removed. If necessary to take any evidence like fingernail clippings, we'll do that. We will clean off the hands and in some cases take photographs of them to document whether there are any injuries of the hands.
Okay. Do you recall whether there were, well, whose decision is it to whether or not anything further is going to be done with in other words, as far as collecting any evidence from the hands?
That decision is made by the pathologist in charge of I believe that's the left hand.
I guess you can kind of see the thumb there, right?
That's right,
Small
yes.
finger, or pinky finger, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And same with this one, I guess. Well, let's see, this is again, what hand is that?
That's the right hand.
And you can tell because the thumb and the pinky finger?
Yes.
Okay. And again, States Exhibit 19. Which hand are we looking at there?
We're looking at the right hand.
Okay. See if I can find one of the left hand here. Just have a second, Your Honor. You also, in addition to photographs, you also document injuries, correct?
Yes.
I mean, in written form.
Yes, in written form and in photographs.
Were there any, particularly to the hands, were there any injuries noted to the hands or the fingers?
No injuries were documented of the hands.
What about the upper arms, the forearms?
There was a bruise of the right elbow.
Okay. And again, is there any scientific way of dating or determining when a bruise occurs?
It's not very scientific, no. You can get a very ballpark view based on the color, but we do not attempt to date bruises.
Okay. Now, as part of your responsibilities, are you tasked with determining a cause of death and a manner of death?
Yes, I am.
What's the difference, doctor, between the cause of death and the manner of death?
The cause of death is either the natural disease or the injury that caused a person to die. So in a case like this, it's gunshot wounds. It could be a heart attack. It could be toxic effects of drugs. So it's the pathophysiology, the thing that went wrong that led to a person dying. The manner of death is something that's put on death certificates to help people have an understanding of the circumstances. And in New Mexico, we have 5 choices for manner of death. And those choices are homicide, suicide, accident, natural, and undetermined.
Now, in this case, Dr. Pro, what was the manner of death?
The manner of death was determined to be homicide.
And how did you reach that conclusion?
That conclusion is based on knowledge of the findings at the autopsy in combination with the story that was told about the circumstances.
Okay. I have one moment, Your Honor. one additional question. I neglected to follow up with you. When we were talking about trajectory, Dr. Pro, is there any way to determine which way Officer Benner was positioned when he received those 3 shots?
No.
Why not? Can you explain? Can you give an example?
For me, that would be something a little bit out of my area of expertise. I can definitely say that he had a gunshot wound that entered the back, so that indicates that the bullet was traveling toward his back when it hit him. But I don't know how he was positioned in relationship to the person who shot him. It's accepted and generally thought that people probably can be moving around a lot in a circumstance like that, so I don't know exactly how Officer Benner was positioned when that occurred, when any of those gunshot wounds occurred.
And would you have to know that as well as perhaps where the shooter was to make that kind of determination?
I think that would probably be necessary to determine exactly what the relationships were, to have a lot more information about the circumstances.
And of course, you don't have that information, or you didn't have it.
Didn't have that information. Don't have a completely clear picture of it at this point either.
Okay, thank you. Pass the witness, Judge.
Now, can you ask about the manner of death? Will you ask the cause of death?
I thought she had said it, but if not, what was the cause of death, Judge?
Yeah, I think that's important. The cause of death was gunshot wounds of trunk.
Thank you, Judge. I thought she had said, but thank you, Your Honor.
Good afternoon, Dr. Pro. Just a couple questions for you.
Okay.
So, Dr. Pro, you started out your testimony and you mentioned that you do not believe that there was any gunshot residue collected by OMI in this case, right?
That's right.
And so if there was a document, say a document that logged the evidence that was received by the police officers on this case from the Office of the Medical Investigator indicating that you had taken gunshot residue, that would be inaccurate?
I think that in this case it would be my memory that were inaccurate. I don't recall that gunshot residue was collected, but if there's documentation that it was and it was released to law enforcement, then I would concede that I remembered wrong.
Okay. And basically if law enforcement tells you to collect the GSR or the gunshot residue, then you do so?
We do so. We do ask them to provide the materials necessary to do it, yes.
Which contains what? What is the process of getting GSR?
I've only done it a couple of times, but the kits contain a pair of gloves that you need to put on and an applicator with a sponge tip and directions in order that direct you to swab the back and the front of the hands and all of the surfaces of the hands. And then those sponge-tipped applicator things are placed in an evidence collection envelope.
How long does it take?
It takes a few minutes.
So a pretty quick process.
Yes.
It's not super involved.
No.
Now, just so clear on where the injuries took place, I'm showing you the body diagram that you were just talking about with the state.
Mm-hmm.
It would be accurate to state that gunshot wound C entered the back on the left.
It would be specific to the upper left arm or shoulder.
Upper left arm, but in the back of the body.
Yes.
And that's why you do this body diagram like this, where you show the front of the body and you show the back of the body.
Yes.
Right? And so gunshot wound C was back. And as you described, the trajectory was back to front, left to right.
Yes.
Okay. Now talking about wound A, also was a wound to the back, correct?
Yes, that's right.
And you described the trajectory on that as back to front, right to left, slightly downward.
Yes.
Likewise, the injury to the leg that's on the right side, correct?
Yes.
Also enters on the back.
Yes.
So all the wounds sustained by Officer Benner were to the posterior or the back of his body, correct?
Yes.
Now you said homicide was the cause of death, manner of death.
Manner of death,
I
yes.
always get those confused. The manner of death was homicide?
Yes.
And what is homicide? I mean, what is the definition from your perspective?
So homicide, as used by someone like me, a forensic pathologist, is a medical legal has a medical legal definition. And from our point of view, a homicide is a death that occurs at the hands of another person. So another person does something that causes a person to die. And in some cases, not all of them, we will take whether there appeared to be any intent to cause harm into account.
Okay. And as far as the manner of death here, the homicide, you don't know who's responsible for that homicide?
No, I don't.
Okay. Instead, you approach it from a legal or a medical standpoint based on your observations during the autopsy as to whether this was an accidental death, whether this was a suicide, or whether this was a homicide or natural causes, right?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So as you sit here today, you can't say who caused it, can you?
Certainly not, no.
May I have a moment, Your Honor? Nothing further. Thank you, Chief.
I may need a couple of minutes to find an exhibit that counsel was referring to. I'm not sure because she didn't name it, but I don't know which. I think it might be one online. No, it's not a document, it's swabs, so probably swabs. Honor. May I approach the witness?